Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. This week I'm going to talk about something that all of you would have missed. Do you remember a speech by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in the Parliament on 22nd November, where she made a significant announcement that seems to have largely escaped everybody, including the media, because it was one paragraph. Okay. Now, this one paragraph harks back to 5 years ago. So, almost 5 years ago, there was something similar. Single sentence tucked into Finance Minister's speech, budget speech of 2021, which was so significant that it could reshape India's capital market regulation. So, what did she say? I quote, I propose to consolidate the provisions of the SEBI Act 1992, Depositories Act 1996, Securities and Exchange Regulation Act 1956, and the Government Securities Act 2007 into a rationalized single securities market code. Huge. If any of you know the history of how SEBI has had to fight for every bit of power that it got and extracted from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs or the Finance Ministry in 1992, you would know the significance of this. But after this announcement in 2021, complete silence. No white paper, no draft legislation, no consultation, nothing that would accompany a reform of this scale. Silence was broken on 22nd September this year when it was announced by the finance minister that the Securities Market Code Bill 2025, I'm going to call it the SMC bill, was quietly listed for introduction in the winter session of Parliament. This winter session began on 1st December, and Parliament has been busy with all kinds of things, including Vande Mataram and its celebration. So there has been no discussion. And as I write this or do this video blog on 17th of December, no text of the bill is available. It's not in the public domain. And this long overdue overall, we don't even know whether it's finally going to see the light of day in this session or it's going to be buried once again. But it's worth discussing because it's important, it needs to be done, and the logic for doing it is fairly straightforward. In fact, as I said, the logic has been evident ever since the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, came into existence in 1990, did not get its statutory teeth until 92 after the securities scam happened, and then suddenly bureaucrats in the Finance Ministry and Ministry of Corporate Affairs were willing to give away some power and push the regulatory responsibility on to Mumbai and this new regulatory body. So, India's capital market has since grown exponentially, especially after COVID. Okay, it has grown in scale, complexity, technological sophistication. It's now among the 4 or 5 top markets in the world, and yet the legal framework governing it remains fragmented across statutes, across ministries, and has not made a difference over the decades. So it's a good thing, it's a fantastic thing that the minister wants to act. Now let's look at how this works, okay, and why it's important. So the Securities Contract Regulation Act, most of them know it as a CRA, goes back, as the Act says, to 1956. This was a day when you had open outcry trading systems with all kinds of signs on a physical trading floor, physical share certificate, and no market regulator. So the Ministry of Corporate Affairs supervised what happened to trading, as well as commodities trading, not just stock trading. The oversight was with MCA, fine. So when in 1992 you set up SEBI with a separate statute, this should have been passed on, right? SCRA should have been subsumed into the new regulation right then. Did not happen. Why? Because bureaucrats in the ministry want to hold on to their part. Believe me, even the finance ministry very reluctantly gave away bit by bit control over capital issues, what have you, was a hard fought battle. And in fact, the SEBI Act hadn't been passed for 2 years because of this. But in 1992, SEBI had G.V. Ramakrishna as its chairman. He, in my opinion, is the finest chairman SEBI has had, put it on the path to what the organization is today. And he was clever, chose to be very pragmatic, and he said, let it be. Let's first get the regulation out so that SEBI has its statutory teeth instead of fighting over regulatory turf. So, SCRA remained there for over 30 years, believe it or not. Now, let's look at the Depositories Act, which they say is going to be subsumed. This, again, is even stranger. This was drafted inside SEBI in 1996 by the senior executive director, Mr. C.B. Bhave. He piloted it through SEBI, through Parliament, and yet did it so cleverly that SEBI has no full regulatory authority. You would find it hard to believe. On one hand, I'm telling you, the Finance Ministry and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs is holding on to their turf, and here is someone drafting an act sitting inside SEBI in 96, which does not give SEBI full control over NSDL. And guess who became the first founder, managing director of NSDL? CB Bhave. And soon enough, very quickly, NSDL began expanding all over the place, tax information network, and what have you. You know what it is today. At the same time, NSDL had full backing from SEBI under Chairman G.N. Bajpai. So SEBI decided we will go for mandatory dematerialization of the secondary market, whether or not we were fully ready for it. But in a jhatka, they decided, yes, this is what is going to happen. It was a transformative reform which immediately gave NSDL full control over secondary market trading. So you could keep physical shares if you were not going to trade them, keep them in your cupboard. But if you wanted to buy or sell, they had to be mandatorily in dematerialized form. You had to open a demat account. People went through horrendous pain to adopt to this. There were not enough DPs. It's not like today. And yet, because of SEBI's support, NSDL virtually became a monopoly. And yet, SEBI did not have full control over NSDL. By mid 2000, the consequences were very clear. Remember, NSDL quickly began to expand. So it was running the tax information network for the income tax department, dematerializing national savings certificate, which goes to the center, Kisan Vikas Patras. It was a record keeper for the national pension system, handling warehouse receipts for commodity exchanges, maintaining the National Skills Registry for NASSCOM, and later became a technology partner for the Goods and Services Information Utility. Guess how many ministries this involves? So nobody had full control or regulatory oversight over NSDL, and this is important because there was a nice regulatory fog. You ask anybody in the market, barring people like me who kept writing about it. In fact, I wrote in 2005 about NSDL spreading electronic tentacles. SEBI was considered the regulator, and only people inside SEBI knew they really had no power except over a small section of NSDL's business. This had tangible consequences, and there were controversies. NSDL failed to detect DSQ software, completely controversial company whose promoter, Dinesh Dalmia, very dubiously issued 50% additional share capital in order to make deliveries in the Calcutta Stock Exchange after what is known as the Ketan Parikh scam. And NSDL was clueless. I broke that story because I got to know it from other sources. It was huge that something like this could happen under NSDL's nose. But believe it or not, hardly any consequences to NSDL or its chairperson. This was followed immediately by what is called the multiple share application scam. So people were applying multiple times and they were getting refunds in a strip of paper. Go back and look. We have all written about it. It's available on Google if you're so interested. But this finally was a wake-up call because it showed to the public that SEBI did not have full oversight. And meanwhile, you had the Central Depository, CDSL, set up by the Bombay Stock Exchange. NSDL is by NSE. And both were expanding into different areas. But because of the pressure, the inspection, the controversy, they at least woke up to say, okay, you can't have them all in the same place. We'll have 100% wholly owned subsidiary with a separate regulatory framework for all these businesses that we're doing. So there were some businesses under insurance, some business under pension. These were under separate subsidiaries. Okay, but the structure still remains. So this might be a procedural cleanup, but the basic fact that these subsidiaries were answerable to different regulators, and mind you, they are subsidiaries. So somebody regulates one part, like the RBI may regulate something, insurance regulator will look at something, and essentially none of them pay attention because it's considered a big market infrastructure institution. And so there was no holistic oversight site for systemic risk, data security, or conflict of interest. None of it mattered. C.B. Bhavi went on to become SEBI chairman. Most of it was controversially sought to be buried, and it's now history. There have been court cases in the Supreme Court. Two SEBI chairmen fought with each other. You may find it hard to believe, but yes, we have gone through all of this about 10 to 12 years ago. The failure to consolidate the Depository Act under SEBI, like I said, was evident 2 decades ago. And in spite of these controversies, government after government, whether UPA, under Congress, or the BJP, has only tinkered with the rules and done nothing. So, jurisdictional overlaps, conflicting definitions, regulatory gaps, which are now a feature of market infrastructure and architecture in India, remained. It is against this backdrop that the SMC bill assumes significance because now we are putting it all together. So, where did this idea come from? And will the finance ministry finally deliver the statutory reform that genuinely meets stated objectives of reducing duplication, streamlining compliance, eliminating obsolete provisions, and increases the ease of doing business? We don't know that. All I'm saying is it is necessary and it's important for India that it's done right. But we have no way of knowing. Like I said, no draft bill, no explanatory memorandum, nothing. Now, the delay is all the more striking given the broader debate over financial sector law reforms. Yes, everything about India, whether it's building an Atal Setu or consolidating laws, goes back 2 decades because there is no action. Even what needs to be done is not done. So, this idea came up in 2013 at the height of the United Progressive Alliance's controversial second term. So they had set up what is called the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission, FSLRC. Highly ambitious, it proposed sweeping reforms. It was set up under a Supreme Court judge and it sat and reimagined the entire financial and regulatory architecture. So it wanted 60 laws replaced, it wanted a unified Indian financial code, it wanted something separate for grievance redress, and it wanted all five financial regulators into one. Now remember, one of these is the RBI, which is the monetary authority. So it got hammered, first of all, by Dr. Raghuram Rajan, who was then the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. And frankly, even in my opinion, that report had multiple dissent notes from its own members, and it was too ambitious, disruptive, and threatened established regulatory fiefdoms. The last is not such a good idea. But the problem with FSLRC, to my mind, was that those who were drafting it and associated with it and being paid for it were all connected one way or the other with the National Stock Exchange, which had already grown into a powerful and dominant monopoly. And if you know what the problems are with the dominant monopoly, you had Indigo last week, we had NSE in 2015-16. We wrote a book about it called Absolute Power, which is available on Amazon. And naturally, with all this happening, with conflicting interests, the RBI governor being angry, all this was quietly shelved. We had an election in 2014 and the BJP decided not to touch it, quite rightly. What survived was this little idea, modest idea of consolidating these laws into one Securities Market Code. But even that has taken 5 years to move from a budget announcement to apparently being on the legislative calendar. Whether it makes it to that calendar or not, we don't know because this government manages to shove in things even on the last day of Parliament and pass it through without discussion. What we still don't know is the details, and the devil lies in the details. There's no clarity even about whether the Government Securities Act 2007 will be folded into the new code because that was not mentioned this time. And to my mind, that is more difficult because, again, it's under the RBI. There's no public explanation of how ongoing investigations under all these different ministries, enforcement actions, adjudication proceedings will be transitioned into the new bill. There's no indication of how SEBI's expanded authority will be balanced with checks, appeal mechanisms, and external oversight. All this is important because we become the guinea pigs. You know what happened with GST rollout? It was a good law, good decision, but because they did it without debugging it properly, without checking it out in a focus group, the pain was inflicted across the country. And here, in a completely electronic system, you can have the same happening. So it's important that the government takes another session of parliament, but puts out a discussion paper. Now, the only hope we have is that the bill will be referred to the Parliamentary Standing Committee for Finance for detailed scrutiny. Again, in the last 5 years, I have not seen the Parliamentary Standing Committee show a lot of interest. We didn't see much even on the big controversy in SEBI. So that process, at least in theory, allows stakeholders to make submissions and ask questions. We don't know if that's going to happen. And remember the background. You're going to empower SEBI, give it phenomenal new powers when SEBI is just coming out of one of the most damaging controversies with the Madhvi Puri Butch issue about conflict of interest against the former chairperson. The government, of course, chose to protect her and allow her to complete the term, but it raised serious questions about code of conduct. So that code of conduct is being overhauled. There is questions about board oversight, governance standards, and all this was referred to a committee. The committee has submitted its report, and no action is yet. In fact, it should have been adopted as quickly as possible. It's not been done. Yet, Parliament wants to introduce a bill to say give more powers to this body where the top four executives are not adhering to the same code of conduct that's applicable to the rest of the employees, and they are too busy to take a decision on it even after a report has been submitted. If you ask me, this change should precede any more powers that SEBI gets because accountability comes first. Instead, key internal reform is unfinished and not adopted. So, concentrated power, if you ask me, demand concentrated accountability. And the promise of reform without addressing this falls short of stated objectives. Give SEBI more powers. It's important, but fix governance issues. Otherwise, it does not inspire confidence, especially when you have judgment after judgment these days where SEBI is pulled up by courts and the appellate tribunal for regulatory overreach. A modern capital market requires a coherent legal framework and a regulator who is demonstrably accountable and transparently supervised. We are already handicapped by the fact that very few members of parliament understand anything to do with the financial market other than probably buying and trading because they rarely ask questions on these issues. So without that, the Securities Market Code is another exercise in legislative tinkering, but will fall short of what India needs for Viksit Bharat, if that is the aim, right? So if you want Viksit Bharat, ask for accountability. It's your job and if you don't want to be guinea pigs of what they unleash on you. If you agree with what I say, please subscribe, spread the word so that more and more investors, there are a crore of you, raise your voice and make it heard. Thank you.